All right, family, I'm back. Once again, my name's Felicia, and I want to um, continue in regards to some of the experience that I had over my life that led me to the choices that I've made recently. Where I ended up was I was still a teenager, um, and I ended up on drugs. I was abused as a child, um, and it wasn't just sexual. It was a mental abuse as well. I think I don't, fault my parents. I used to, but they were brought up with a certain form of discipline, and that tends to filter down to the children that you raise. So I do believe still that some children need a bit of a spanking to let them know that okay, here's the line. You cross it, your hind end gonna get a little reddened. But there is also another line that parents are not to cross. And I have to admit, in the heat of decision, sometimes parents get um, taken away, and the decision isn't the best decision. I'm not trying to make excuses for them. I believe that this particular parent in question is, I think he had underlying issues. I was the only child that wasn't officially his. My mother was married to my father when she became pregnant with me. My father went out to the military though, and since my mother was still young, 14, 15 ish, the prospect of being, you know, celibate while her husband was away, whether it crossed her mind or not, she didn't follow with it. So when he came back, he asked for a divorce once. I guess it got out there that your wife been everywhere. Like I said, my mother was very fertile. I'm the oldest of a lot of kids. I think she had 10, uh, but there's only seven surviving children, 7 or 8, and I'm the oldest. So there were many times where I thought, Mom, you just had me just to have to babysit or to be able to wash the dishes or keep the house clean or whatever. But I think that's every teenager that feels that way sometimes, especially the oldest. You just feel like you the person that's there to be used. And I took on that stance, and then I embellished on it as my life went by. Um, Child, I used to get toe up. I used to get high, drunk. I wasn't really a drinker, even though I was drinking to kind of like fit in with whatever crowd that I was around at that time. If they was drinking, then I'm gonna drink something. But that wasn't really my personal preference. When I'm at home alone, and it's just me and the walls around me, then at that time, of course, I would, I smoke my weed. I got to have it. I used to think that I would die smoking it. I was so sold out to it. Um, Even though it wasn't that it made me so happy, it was just that it helped me to get through that day. I even used to say that once when and if I did pass, I ain't want them to really, like to have a funeral of sorts. I want to have like a blunt party, just smoking till you're unconscious, and instead of paying for like a casket and all this whatnot, you gonna use the money to pay for wrapping paper and as much marijuana as you can get your hands on. And I used to think that was cool, or that was the thing to do. Um, I met Well, let me just say it like this. Okay, so I was dating this guy, and we were childhood friends. He used to be a next door neighbor of mine when I was like 5, 6, or 7, and or so forth. But anyway, I left my hometown at like age 15 because I knew at the route that I was going, I had already dropped out of school. So the route I was going to end up pregnant somewhere, and I wasn't going to be able to meet the dreams that I thought I was going to be able to do. So I need to get out of there. So I entered Job Corps and, left home. Job Corps, child. It was a lot of kids my age and up. into like 2021 or what have you. And, it gives you an opportunity away from your family to kind of see what the world is like and what you're going to do. So there were people from all around, not just from my city. Um, and I was miles and miles away from my home. So, what I learned up until that point, I had to utilize in order to get by or in order to go forward. And while I was there, some kids that I befriended murdered a young lady. And I said it, murdered a young lady. And I never thought that kids our age would think of stuff like that. But they were worshiping, um, and they were practicing witchcraft and just crazy outlandish stuff that I would have never thought to do, never thought of, never even recognized as being real. And I remember the guy, he used to I thought he was teasing at the time. It was like, I'm going to send a little man to your room and he going to cut you up and he going to do things. And I used to tell him, you send that little man in my room, I'm going to beat his tail. And then I'm going to come to your room and I'm going to beat your tail. Just letting them know you can't intimidate me. You can't scare me. But I used to laugh it off and think it was a game. Until one day, this poor little young girl who her room actually was assigned across the hall from me. They convinced her to go off campus, and they beat her up and they cut her up, and they drew a pentagram or whatever on her chest, and it was just horrible. It was really horrible. And to know that I was friends with those people, and they had these practices just really blew me away. You learn things when you really get out there. You learn things that you don't ever want to really know, but now there it is. It's out there. And I wasn't protecting myself against it. I really wasn't. They had a list of people that they wanted to hurt afterwards, and unfortunately, even though I was thinking that these are my friends, I was on that list. It was really scary, and it was eye opener that you never know people. You think that they're your friends, but you don't have any friends. You got acquaintances. Okay, that friendship thing. Some people are lucky enough to have lifelong friends. Some people, we just got acquaintances, people that we've met in life. They seem to be all right with us right now, but the jury's still set out on them. Um, but yeah. So in the interim, I'm just I pray for the family that had to deal with the loss of their child. That young lady, she didn't deserve that. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? But I digress. Job Corps, like I said, was an eye opener for me, but it did help me get my GED because I don't think I would have got it otherwise. And but I only would work for like fast food places because I didn't have to take a Tinker test, and I wasn't trying to get it up, and I knew I couldn't give it up long enough, like 30 days or so that I could be able to go in some place and get tested and pass it, and it got to a point really that I found out later on that I smoked so much of it that I couldn't, it's not like the same as other people where you wait 30 days and you get tested and you'll test clean if you haven't, had that particular drug within the month. No, it got to the point to where I had smoked so much of it, it was embedded in my DNA, to whereas, and this is, I ended up being homeless at a time. I've been homeless, and I've been in several homeless shelters throughout my life, but I caught myself just trying to get myself together, and to stay in this homeless shelter, they test you, and you had to make sure that you weren't doing anything illegal in order to continue to stay there. And so they tested me for 6 months. Every month for 6 months straight, it kept coming out positive. I'm like, this is crazy because I haven't done anything. And really what's even more crazy is, and I'm just all over the place with this now, is that, before I got to this shelter, I came to a point in my life where I was just so depressed, so messed up, that I because I had a boyfriend, like I said, that, he was a childhood neighbor. He and I met in my early 20s, I think it was. No, my late 20s. He and I met again, started dating. He moved in with me. My mother and them moved in with me because my mom was having some hardships or whatever, my brothers and my sister. And we were all trying to just be a family and kind of support each other. And he had children by another young lady. He had me believing, though, that it was just him and I. I didn't want him to be a deadbeat dad, so I would even take him over to his baby mama's house so he could see his children or visit with his children, like on my way to work or on my way home from work or what have you. I didn't mind dropping them off. He over there making another baby. And he denied it all the way to the end, right until I think the birth of the child. That's when he finally was like, yeah, that's my baby. And we had been together like over 7 years. And I was just so hurt, and it was like that last straw. That straw at that last straw when you tired of being sick and tired and you so tired of being sick and tired. That's where I was. And I had convinced myself, and I don't know, it was one night when I was really extra high. I convinced myself, I'm going to show them. I'm going to go and, I can't swim, so I'm going to go and drown myself. And then when they find my body washed up somewhere, then he's going to feel guilty, especially guilty because how he did me. He didn't treat me right. My mom's going to feel extra guilty because she let all these things happen to me throughout my childhood up until this point. She could have saved me, Just everybody's going to feel guilty for using me, And I had myself convinced about that. And I had the idea to just hop on the nearest Greyhound and go to a place or the ocean, to whereas I couldn't change my mind. I recognized that the power of the ocean was so strong that if I got so far out there and then said, well, no, I changed my mind, I don't want to kill myself, then the choice would be taken from me because the wave would take me. And since I can't swim, I would just drown anyway. So I got on the nearest bus and I went to Wilmington, North Carolina. And when I got there, it was late in the evening, dark, and I didn't hear or see an ocean, which was even more crazy. So it was like that option to do what I went down there, what I planned to do was taken away from me. But I started walking, and I was like within walking distance to a Salvation Army shelter, and they took me in. And really, I was so upset about not being able to find the ocean. I told the intake specialist that, entered me into the shelter. I told him I was upset because I couldn't find the ocean and why. Needless to say, they reported it. They put it in their, in their notes. It was reported. I was entered into a state facility there, close to Wilmington, North Carolina, Cherry Hospital. Because I was, I was trying to hurt myself. It was time to check me in for sure. And I stayed there for a good while until the doctors felt like I would no longer be a danger to myself. So I was released back to the shelter because I didn't want to go back home. I knew I'd be back in the same position. So when I was released back to the shelter, I had to go by their rules. That's when they started testing me for drugs and everything, and I had to test clear. And so it had been a few months in the state hospital, and then I'm in the shelter 6 months down the line. I'm still not testing clear. So it's been almost a year just about, and I still wasn't testing clear. It was over a year. I know it was every bit of 17 months, I think, before I finally tested clean. And by that time I had met someone which is now my husband. And he, at the time, didn't tell me that he had an addiction to drugs. And, I can't tell you what, because that's his story to tell. But his was a lot stronger than my addiction was, of course, because if you know about weed, you feel like you could stop and start whenever you want to. Now, it was stronger in me because if I chose to buy a bag of weed instead of paying for rent that was going to keep a roof over my head or food, it was pretty strong in me. But, you know, I had stopped for, months. I had 16, 18 months, I was clean. Um, But when I got with him, I fell in love with him, and we moved in together. And then that's when he could no longer hide his addiction. And the fact that I was in this relationship with him and I'd already went, I was all in about loving him, which is dangerous because I just came out of a relationship where I was all in about loving somebody, and, then they made a baby on me. I didn't want to lose him, and I thought if I loved him enough, I love that habit from him. He'll be more addicted to me than that. Which when I learned, or as time went on with our relationship, I got to learning that there's no way you can love somebody out of an addiction. And it depressed me even more. And so then I relapsed and I went back to smoking. So he's smoking and I'm smoking. And we did that for several years, the first several years of our relationship. And I do mean several years. We were well into 9 years in our relationship, which is the longest relationship I ever had. And we were going from shelter to shelter. Sometimes we could stay in an apartment or a house for a length of time. We stayed in these apartments, which really was like a hotel, for like maybe almost 2 years. Pay as you go type of efficiency studio type place. And we stayed there almost 2 years because they didn't bother us. We would smoke all we wanted to. Our neighbor smoked, different drugs or whatever, shooting up, snorting, or what have you. So the whole area was of that mentality. And so we were able to stay there for a long length of time because we weren't being judged. Everybody around us was doing the same thing. We got really messed up. We got really turned around. Credit just shot. Even if we wanted to stand on our own 2 feet, right, we just messed up our lives so bad. It just didn't look like there was going to be any way in which we could save ourselves. And nobody's out there reaching out to try to save you either. And we were going from one shelter to another, one shelter to another. My husband and I, collectively, we've been to about 8 or 9 shelters, either where it's together or apart. And he had an idea to go home, where his mother lived and his brother and his sister lived. I guess it was a way to kind of try to save himself, and that's what we chose to do. I'll give you the rest of that at the next video. If you liked this bit of information, or if it sounded interesting to you, or you're intrigued, please stay tuned for the next video. But also, I encourage you, press the like button on this one, as well as subscribe, so then that way when I post another one, you won't miss it. I really appreciate our time. I appreciate you listening and hearing what I have to say up until this point. But once again, if you liked it, then press like, and I'm interested to see your comments. Thank you.